As someone that enjoys listening to music and talks about it on the internet, I've been put through the unfortunate situation of having to face the death of some of my favorite artists. And actually, even if I don't like the artist in question, it's always shocking to hear the news of someone passing away because it puts into perspective how vulnerable life is, how one day someone's here and the next day they're gone. And it's because of how confusing and shocking this whole thing is that we try and immortalize them through the things they did when they were alive. Painters have paintings, football players have the football matches they played when they were alive, and musicians have their music. It is actually very normal to see a peak in their popularity after they pass away. It's quite unfortunate, but it's the reality of it. You know, people like to reminisce. They go back to the albums they love and they listen to them one last time as a form of goodbye to the artist. And actually, because of the media coverage, some people listen to these songs for the first time ever. However, it is a very different thing when record labels put as many pieces together as they can, as many demos and unfinished tracks as they can find to craft one last album or multiple last albums to kind of squeeze as much money as they can before they forget that artists even existed, unless they find more songs and more ways to squeeze money out of them. That results in multiple cash grabs and horrible albums. There's many examples in XXXTentacion's discography, Lil Peep, Juice WRLD, all these people that passed away really young and had a lot of unfinished material, or songs that they were about to release, you know, just weeks or months after they passed away, that the label decides to release as a form of tribute to the artist, when in actuality everything they're doing is just trying to get more money out of it. And of course, I know that a lot of you will say, but there's many examples. There's Life After Death by Biggie, or The 7 Day Theory by Tupac, Are You Still Down by the same artist. If you want other examples outside of rap, or you have Brainwashed by George Harrison, and you also have one of my favorite albums ever, one of the greatest albums of all time, Closer by Joy Division. So if these albums are so celebrated by fans, why is it that I think, or what is it that I used to think, that posthumous albums were not a good idea for the legacy of the artist? Well, the thing with these albums is that even though they were released weeks and even months after the artist passed away, they were completed. They were finished, 100% finished. Not the record label nor any of the producers had any say in how the album was going to sound like, because it was already pre-approved by the artist. So obviously this means that it's an actual last effort by the artist, not a cash grab by a record label, because they couldn't change anything. It was already done. That's the reason why this album sounds perfectly fine, and you do find a connection between the music and the artist. And by the way, this doesn't only apply to record labels and producers, this also applied to other band members, as we saw in the latest Beatles song, Now and Then by Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. They finished a demo that John Lennon recorded in 1978, and the result was a soulless attempt to craft one last Beatles song, but they failed miserably in the process. I have a whole video on that song, and I have a whole video on the idea of using AI to finish a song initially started by John Lennon. If it was crafted in his years with the Beatles, it would have been better, because you could argue that, you know, this is the Beatles. John Lennon and George Harrison formed the Beatles with Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney, so why are they not allowed to finish a song that John Lennon started? Well, basically because John Lennon didn't put out the song in his lifetime. He didn't think the song was finished. There was a lot of things about the track that he would have done differently. Therefore, it sounds more like a Paul McCartney track, not like a Beatles song, because the Beatles split up in 1969. So the product that comes out of that idea, you know, an idea of one person, because let's be honest, Ringo Starr is not really a great songwriter, so we can credit all the extra things the song has that John Lennon didn't participate in to Paul McCartney. So the result is a song that sounds like a Paul McCartney track, not as a Beatles song, not as a John Lennon song, a Paul McCartney song. All of these different releases and situations I've been going through ever since I started listening to music have made me dislike posthumous albums immediately. From the conception, from the idea of making an album after an artist passed away with their unfinished material, I immediately disapprove. However, there's an exception for every single thing on this beautiful green earth, and in this particular case, the exception is Mac Miller and his last album, Circles. And I know that a lot of you may be trying to type in the comments right now, but Luna, you literally just said a minute ago that when an artist releases an album before they die, even if it's released after, that is perfectly acceptable. So how is Circles by Mac Miller different? It is well stated that Mac Miller had finished the album already, right? No, a lot of people misunderstand what Jon Brion said about this album when he received all the recordings and all the different ideas and demo tapes he had. He said that Mac Miller was well into the recording of the album. He didn't say anything about production, instrumentation, and concept, because there's a lot of things that go into the creation of an album. Recording is one of them, and it's actually the most important one. Obviously, without vocals, you don't have anything. However, instrumentation, production, track listing, how you want to organize the tracks inside the album, all of it is really important for how an album works, you know, if it's a good album or not. And that was all Jon Brion's decision, and, you know, some other producers that also collaborated, which names I'm gonna list over here. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is not really that good, so I'm gonna write them down. While Mac Miller had all the tracks written already and the songwriting for the album was basically finished, the recording process was still incomplete, which is the reason why even when the album has amazing production and really good performances, for the most part it sounds like it could have been a bit better. And given more time, you know, given the time to fully finish the album, Mac would have chosen to, you know, add some mods in his voice like he did in previous albums. But this album was far from being finished. A lot of the decisions were made by Jon Brion. So why is it that I believe that this is a good representation of Mac Miller's legacy when 30-ish% of the album was completed by someone that was not Mac and actually wasn't all that close to him technically? Well, there's a few reasons. The most important one is the fact that this album wasn't supposed to be a standalone album. It was supposed to be a continuation or a sister album to Swimming, released in 2018, the last album he released while being alive. It was supposed to represent a cycle that Mac Miller lived through at a certain point of his life, you know, swimming in circles. And while this doesn't necessarily need to mean anything, both albums are very different. You know, they can't be considered sister albums or continuations because they both mean different things and they represent Mac at very different points during his life. Jon Brion's contributions to Circles is very surface level, adorning the tracks, making sure that everything sounds tight rather than actually creating any melodies, because the skull of the songs, even in the melody and the bass instrument, were already set by Mac Miller. As you guys know, he is a multi-instrumentalist. He's a really good producer as well, so a lot of the ideas on how the songs were supposed to sound were already set. And the fact that Jon Brion was heavily involved with Swimming, allowing him to have a vision of how Circles is supposed to sound like, was the icing on the cake and created an album that's worthy of Mac Miller's legacy and that actually should form part of the canon discography of Mac Miller, because posthumous albums often are marked as exceptions, as albums that are extra, not part of the artist's canon, because again, they sound very different from what the original material or the material that the artist actually approved and released when they were alive sounded like. In this case, the label respected Mac's vision and decided that even though a lot of the songs here don't have hit potential, actually I would say there's not a massive hit in this album, you know, they still respected Mac's idea for the album and they wanted to go with it, which is the reason why, again, this album sounds so connected and just makes sense inside his discography. Actually, I would go as far as to say that Swimming and Circles are my favorite albums from his discography, even though I really love albums like Watching Movies with the Sound of, Good I Am, The Best They Ever mixtape, things like that I also do enjoy. However, the level of vulnerability and honesty and just comfort I feel from albums like Swimming and Circles are unmatched, and that is the reason why I feel like this is an exception of the rule and why I'm more open to posthumous albums after I heard Circles, you know, because I feel like if you get a producer or someone that actually knew the artist and worked with them and understood the vision of the artist, if they carry on with the work and if they actually do it based on not what they want to do with the album but what the artist would have liked to do with the album, thanks to all the blueprints and how the way they handled the songwriting, the way he talked about music, the way he improvises, you know, there's a lot of improvisation in the recording sessions of Mac Miller, so all these different things hint towards what he wanted to do with Circles. And it's because Jon managed to read all these different things that Circles ended up being such a wonderful, beautiful, but also bittersweet album. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the sound of this album. I'm not going to talk about any specific tracks. This is not a formal review. If you guys want me to do that, then definitely leave it down below in the comments and I'll make sure to check it out and do this as soon as I can. However, I wanted to jump here and talk about the record, mainly because it's a very special album to me. I feel very related to a lot of the things Mac raps about and sings about on this album, especially when when it comes to, you know, being tired of the everyday life, you know, having 2 jobs and a YouTube channel to maintain. It's very difficult to wake up in the morning knowing that you have to grind again and again and again. And even though everything seems to be part of a process that will one day end, and you should relax once in a while and take everything by the day, it's really hard to actually do it, which is the reason why this album's work as a form of comfort zone for me. And after I got the news that he passed away after releasing one of my favorite albums from him at the time, Swimming, it was very heartbreaking, you know, and it was very confusing, because even though I'm not the biggest fan, this album means a lot to me, and that is the reason why I changed my mind when it comes to Posthumous albums. Because if I were to keep this mentality of no Posthumous albums allowed, and, you know, not being able to release any material after the artist passes away, I wouldn't have this album. I wouldn't have this lovely comfort zone that's bittersweet but beautiful at the same time, that seems to help me through a lot of difficult situations in my life. So that's the reason why my mentality changed, and that is the reason why, if done properly, I believe that Posthumous albums can be a beautiful goodbye letter to us fans. However, that is only my personal opinion. I know that you guys probably have your own, so go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. I also want to know what your favorite Mac Miller album is, so go ahead and leave it down below with a small explanation of why you like that album so much. If you liked the video, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other videos that I upload. I would love to see you guys commenting on any other type of video you guys want me to make. If it's a review, if it's a discography ranking, a tier list, I make all sorts of videos related to music on this channel, so go ahead and leave me your request. Once again, I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.